Halman. That's one L, Halman, Senior. I lived in the Springfield area from I was born in 1930. I lived in the Springfield area from 1931 to about 1942. And that was my extent of living in this area. But it was a real nice area. Everybody kept their place up. And it was during the Depression, so everybody except the people that owned the homes, the buildings, rented. And I remember that our rent on one particular place on Phelps Street was, I think we paid either $6 or $7 a week for a apartment. That was a 2-bedroom, kind of a living room, dining room, and a kitchen area.
And the players, you want to tell them who all, Mom, Dad, George, who all?
Well, that was my mother and my dad, and I had one brother. And both of us, my brother and I, went to 5th and Hubbard. That's what we called it. Then we went to Kirby Smith, and then we went to Andrew Jackson. My mother was born in Stark, Florida, and my dad was a damn Yankee. He came from the Bronx after World War I and married my mother, and we Southernized him right quick. My mother had him eating grits and hominy and collard greens. My mother had 9 sisters and brothers, and of course that was, I guess, the way it was. She was born in 1902, I think it was, and
so her siblings from Stark came up here and settled in Springfield too?
Yes, some of them did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now, her sisters and things, some of them were born in Georgia, south part of Georgia. I was showing my daughter, is that Fourth?
That was Fourth. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right down there on the right was where the Ku Klux Klan's office was.
Oh.
They'd held a meeting there once a month, and they'd come out. We lived in an apartment across the street upstairs. So I'd go out on the porch and I'd watch these guys. They'd park their cars and they'd get out in their white robes and hoods. And
you're kidding? Just
oh,
right
no.
out in the...
Oh, yeah. No.
About what year?
This was in the 36, 37.
Do you remember going up and down these streets as a boy?
Oh, Lord, yes. And, at 7 and 8, we would walk. In fact, I walked from Phelps, and when we lived on 2nd Street, I walked to 5th and Hubbard. Nobody bothered him then. Nobody bothered you. You had no problems. 80-85% of the people in this here were poor people. When I say poor, I'm talking about poor. We were so poor we were almost eating dirt.
I asked him if he rode his bicycle on these sidewalks.
I didn't have a bicycle until I got about 15.
Yeah, no bicycles.
My dad worked 6 days a week
There's Phelps.
swinging a paintbrush. He was a painter. When him and the crew he was with got through painting the house, that was the end of his job. Had to try to find another house to paint, or the foreman that he was working for would try to find another one. Yeah, we used to walk from the house right down here to
Well,
Confederate Park at night. and sit on the benches because it was so hot in the apartments in the summer.
Really?
Whew, boy, we couldn't. Very few people, other than maybe the owners, had air conditioning, you know, and everybody would be down in the park, and then we'd go out through that wire tunnel. They had a fence. I mean,
The Rose
pipe.
Arbor.
Yeah, yeah. And we'd go out and it'd come into Main Street, and we'd go down, and there was a creek, McCoy Creek, and then the first building was Claude Nolan Cadillac, and then in the second building, or second block, before you got to Union, there was a potato chip company, and we'd go in there, and for a nickel you could get a bag of potato chips. There were pieces this big around and about that high for a nickel back then.
Do you know the name of the company?
Wise
Wise Chips.
Wise potato chips, yeah.
Huh.
And we'd take a big bag of those and go back and sit in the park and eat and feed the pigeons and till about probably 10 o'clock, and then go back home and try to sleep. When we got a little older, well, maybe 8, 10, we would walk with our dad. Our mother wasn't really sports minded. My dad, he used to play semi-professional ball, and we would walk to Durkeeville, if you know where that is,
Yes.
on West 8th Street at Myrtle.
Yes.
We'd walk over there to see a game, and my dad worked the scoreboard, so we all got in free. Well, right down there on the left, there was a building that WJAX was in, and from Phelps Street, dead ends right down there in front of it, and I'd walk up, and me and my brother, and we'd go in. They'd let us go in and sit in the lobby of the kind of like a studio, and we would watch the Lone Ranger when it was being taped and on TV, on radio, and also Jack Armstrong, the All-American Boy. I don't know if you ever heard of that one. We used to walk to the Florida Theater. You know where that is. My brother and I, we used to walk to the Florida Theater and see a movie, and I think I paid 8 cents to get in, being a kid under 12. I lived in this white house on the left, upstairs.
And the
And
Klan
the
building was
Klan-
there?
The Klan lived in this yellow building over here. Only thing is, that building doesn't, pull up a little more in front of that. That doesn't, it was a different building
That
than
might be
that.
a new one. Is that a new construction?
Yeah, that's a different building, because this was more like like a Masonic building would be, more like a kind of a temple.
Yeah.
The neighbors looked out for their kids and other people's kids, and nobody, very rare did anyone ever get in trouble. You just didn't do it. That's all there was to it.
And tell me what happened at 5 o'clock p.m.
Well, at 5 o'clock, we had to be somewhere, like when we were down there in the park, across from Confederate, playing baseball or football or whatever we were playing. Somebody, not only for us, but other guys, somebody would have to have a watch. And when it got 5 o'clock, that meant go home. And you never saw so many kids scatter in so many different directions whenever somebody would say it's 5 o'clock, he'd holler out, you know. And I mean, they were just gone.
Do you remember the steam whistle going off at 5 o'clock?
Oh yes, Big Jim.
Yeah.
Big Jim.
That was the sign too, right?
That was a great big help, because when that whistle went off, we dropped what we were doing, and if it was the football we was playing or the baseball and bat and glove was somebody else's, we'd drop it and hope they picked it up if it was theirs. But I mean, we headed for the house. You never saw anything like it.
Because Dad was coming home and it was supper time?
Yes, ma'am. It was. That's exactly what it was. Supper time. I was brought up to eat breakfast, dinner, and supper.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I still eat today. Sometimes the kids want my wife and I to come over for dinner. I said, now, are you talking about at 12 o'clock or are you talking about 6 o'clock dinner? Dinner, Dad? It's at 6. I said, no, my dinner's at 12. But that's the way I was raised. Very, very seldom did you ever see a fire truck in the neighborhood or a police car. Very rare. However, on the corner of Phelps and Market, there was a lady there that had 2 huge date palms. And we used to get those palms, steal them. There ain't no other way to put it. And she'd come out hollering, and man, here we go. You know, kids just scatter. But
What did you use the palms for? Play.
didn't use them.
Are you talking about the little
Fruits?
The dates.
Oh,
yeah.
the fruits.
Yeah, the date palms.
Oh, you were eating them?
For
or throwing
eating.
them at
Eating
it?
them.
Oh, eating them.
Eating them.
Gotcha.
Yeah. We moved because in 42 we moved out of the area because of the war, and my dad, being a veteran Navy from the First World War, he felt it was his duty to go back in, and he did. And then they sent him to a naval air station at Sanford, Florida. And it was a new station. In fact, he was one of the 100 that they sent down there to get it ready and open it for troops, for trainees, you know, and personnel. He was a training officer in the Second War. In the First War, I think I told you, he was on the USS Texas battleship. He was a wireless operator. We were rationed. You couldn't get but one pair of shoes a year, and they rationed different groceries. There was a store down on First Street, right west of Market. I guess if it's still there, I could show you. And that store handled government commodities, they called it. And everything in peas, beans, sugar, flour, tea, whatever, was in a white paper bag according to size and stamped U.S. government. And we had a card, and we could go down and get a certain amount of that food free. And of course, it was probably a couple of years after the war started and was going that the economy and things picked up.
Mm-hmm.
This, to me, was a great place to grow up because, like I say, everybody was poor. Nobody had nothing. I mean, what you gonna steal from somebody that had nothing? But we lived from day to day. And my mother was an excellent homemaker, and she handled and knew how to handle what little bit of money that my dad made and get the things we needed.